Welcome to English Express. No glamour, no clamor, simple explanation for last moment revision. We are discussing Chapter 8 of To Kill a Mockingbird. A lot is happening in Chapter 8 of To Kill a Mockingbird. To start with, we read about the snowfall in Macomb. It was the first snowfall in decades, and school had been cancelled. So therefore, that gives reason for Jem and Scout to be excited about the situation, and they seek out a new adventure. They decide to make a snowman out of mud and dirt. Moreover, we also get familiarized with the character of Mr. Avery, who had made a very disturbing comment which had upset the children when Mr. Avery said that the bad behavior of children causes such a change in weather in Macomb. They were not able to accept Mr. Avery's comment on the same, and even when he would elaborate on things like as if when Mr. Avery said that it was written on the Rosetta Stone that when children disobeyed their parents, smoked cigarettes, and made war on each other, the seasons would change. And Jem and I were burdened with the guilt of contributing to the aberrations of nature, thereby causing unhappiness to our neighbors and discomfort to ourselves, highlights that this comment of Mr. Avery had left a deep impact on the kids, and they decided that when they would make their snowman, they would build it out of mud and slush, and it to a great extent, resembled Mr. Avery in a lot of ways because of the insults heaped on them. This also highlights a unique feature of child psychology. We as adults, we sometimes don't realize that our little ridiculous jokes can also be sometimes affecting a child's mind in a very negative way. Children are very sensitive and they are prone to little stuff if commented in a very negative way. So therefore, obviously, Jem and Scout did not take it in the right manner and therefore wanted to make a snowman resembling Mr. Avery. But Atticus, on the other hand, who was very impressed with the efforts that Jem and Scout had put into the snowman, realizes that it did resemble Mr. Avery, and hence asked the children to hide all the traces and evidences which made it resemble Mr. Avery and not to insult him. Highlights Atticus as a father, someone with strong principles who wants to instill the right morals and values and ethics into his own children. This also gives us a vivid picture of society. Children of that era, of the 1900s, were not, though vehemently protesting, were extremely obedient to their parents. And at the same time, parents exerted an authoritative role in a child's life. Although they might have been close to Atticus, but there was always a sense of a distance between them when it came to ideas. The father was a father, more of a father figure rather than someone in the modern century who would come down to the level of a friend. Perhaps they were too young, therefore they didn't have that realization. But as we see Jem and Scout maturing through the novel, we realize that Atticus was definitely a great father. It is also said by Jem in one portion of chapter 8, actually by Scout rather than Jem, where she comments, "Jem, I ain't ever heard of a nigger snowman," I said. he won't be black long, he grunted. So, therefore, when they were into making that snowman, it was supposed to be made of mud and slush and dirt, and therefore it was black in color. A dark comment on the racist ideas imbibed and ingrained into children, highlighting the society that would discriminate and would talk about racist ideas, where children would casually talk about the black folks in a derogatory manner, not even realizing that the words or terms nigger or negro would be actually taken as abusive or derogatory ideas. Nevertheless, as we proceed with the text, we look into the other events that are also taking place in Macomb County. We also notice that Mrs. Radley had passed away that winter, though nobody spoke about her much because she was not very sociable, neither amicable, but she would just come out to water her plants. That's it. The children wanted to gauge the reason being the cause of Mrs. Radley's death being Boo Radley, but they were highly disappointed when Atticus said that she died of natural causes, thereby putting an end to the children's curiosities and high-hit imagination. We see that during this winter, Miss Maury wraps her azaleas to protect them from freezing. Highlights Miss Maury's interest in gardening and how she is so protective about each plant. Her love for gardening, her love for plants gets highlighted. As we proceed into the latter half of this chapter, we do notice that Miss Maury's house catches fire. The townspeople come to her aid, highlighting the mentality of the small town. The small town people being quite helpful and selfless, even risking their own lives to protect an individual resident or a member in the neighborhood, unlike the selfish and detached nature that we often find in big cities where people are not bothered. Atticus, in this situation, manages to save Miss Maury's old oak chair, which she considered to be one of her prized possessions. The Abbotsville fire truck arrives, which manages to extinguish the fire. While this chaotic scene unfolds, Scout and Jem, who stood absolutely dumbstruck, awestruck at the situation, glaring at a fire that had struck out at Miss Maury's house, and it was ruining everything, burning everything into ashes. When Scout goes back home after everything is settled, Atticus points out to the blanket wrapped around Scout's body. This is pretty much shocking because the blanket was not around her when they watched everyone extinguish the fire. And ultimately, they guess or assume rather that Boo Radley had probably been the person to put the blanket around her while she was shivering in the cold. And this realization also dawns upon Jem that Boo Radley, who put this blanket around Scout, was not a harmful individual. Perhaps he was pretty protective, affectionate towards the Finch kids. And at the same time, although this was strange, but it was quite appealing and interesting for the kids to observe. Jem also confides before his father and tells Atticus about the gifts in the knothole and about his mended pants. All of these add to the psychology of the various characters projected against the various situations. We see that Boo Radley comes out more as a friendly, affectionate, protective older adult who wants to take care of the children even in the midst of this chaos and panic. He is a quiet, silent worker who observes and protects. At the same time, we see the viewpoint of Gem and Scout slightly improving. They seem to be developing natural attraction towards Boo Radley in a more respectful manner. It also highlights that Scout and Gem are quite sensitive individuals. When they are affected by the words of Mr. Avery, or even when they learn from Miss Maudie that she wishes to protect her azaleas, they also learn about Boo Radley's point of view and the fact that he is trying to be protective and caring about the children. It is also noticed that though the house burns down and Miss Maudie is left without shelter, she is still very hopeful and optimistic, highlighting the positive, optimistic, and very bright Miss Maudie, who turns out to be more of a positive influence on the children when she says that she will rebuild a new home for herself. Mind you, I repeat, a new home for herself, not a house, because a house is a building, whereas a home is where the heart is. Therefore, she wishes to have a new house, a new home for herself, though smaller in size, but with a much larger garden. This gives us a more positive, impactful insight into the text. All of these factors make Chapter 8 replete with ideas, psychological dimensions, and factors which make this chapter really interesting. And that would bring us to the end of our discussion of chapter 8. For more content like this, please like, share and subscribe to my channel. Thank you.